eventually they turn on you. So
All right, I'm going to start we're live here.
Okay.
At 7 o'clock. Actually, Jennifer, probably should defer to you on that, but at 7 o'clock.
Okay. Yeah, so it's going to be a little rough because I've never actually, conducted an official meeting before. So Adam, you had sent me like a script that I need to say, like, once the meeting gets started. Do I have to, I should say that once it goes? Am I saying it right, like the virtual meeting thing?
Yeah, I think so. There, you could probably, for the moment, skip the stuff about public comment, but I think it probably makes sense to just mention that this is being conducted remotely in accordance with all of those warnings and stuff. Executive
Okay.
orders.
All right. Do we have everybody? Let's see. I have to scroll over to see all my participants. No, I don't see Fred yet. Is Fred here? No. Okay. Well, are we so for official meeting purposes, do we have to get started like right at 7, or can we give it a couple of minutes to wait for another person to come? How does that usually work?
Well, these are public meetings, so they'll be publicly noticed, which means you should start on time.
Okay. All right. Well, shall we officially get the meeting started? Everyone good with that? All right. I call this meeting to order. That sound good? All right. And then, so this is the first official meeting and for the Town of East Greenbush Conservation Advisory Council. And this meeting's being conducted remotely pursuant to Executive Order 202.1 and related federal, state, and local guidance related to the COVID-19 virus. And member staff, applicants are participating in a virtual meeting being Zoom. Sorry, not applicants, but yes. And it's being broadcast on the town's YouTube channel, being recorded, and will be later transcribed in accordance with Executive Order 202.1. So for those of you participating tonight, please note there may be a 30-second delay between this meeting and the YouTube broadcast. And everyone is requested to mute themselves when they're not speaking to reduce interference. And let's see, this is for the Conservation Advisory Committee. And when we do take public comments, you'll be able to unmute yourself and put things in the chat box as well. And during the course of the meeting, in order to keep the broadcast and discussion clear, I will call on members to offer comments during the discussion of agenda items. All right, members may also request to speak via the chat box, and you can unmute yourselves to offer comment if urgent and as needed. But to avoid talking over each other, you're encouraged to wait until called upon. All right. Zach, let's see here. And then I believe we can get started. Is that good? Thumbs up? All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for bearing with me. So I'm Jennifer Dean, chairperson for the Conservation Advisory Council. And so I guess another question, assuming every once in a while we might have other participants from the public, should we go around and introduce ourselves? Do you usually do that at, I guess, most meetings?
Jennifer, do you want to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and you could do a roll call after that?
Yeah, okay, great. That's a great idea. Okay, can everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? All right. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
All right. Thanks. We can add that to the agenda when we get our standardized agenda. All right. Great. So we'll do a roll call for the members of the Conservation Advisory Council. So let's see. Do we have Adam Toby?
Yes.
We have Jennifer Hickson.
Yes.
Victoria Mannery,
Yes.
and Fred Hinson. Okay, I'm not seeing Fred. So we'll go ahead and get started, and maybe he'll join us once we get going. All right, great. Well, thanks everyone. And please, well, feel free to, I know it's a small enough group. Feel free to interrupt me if I'm forgetting something, because I'm sure I will forget some things in the process of all this. But so, a couple of the first things to work on as we get started is to, well, I guess first of all, assign someone to take notes. So we need a Conservation Advisory Council recorder. And we can decide as a group whether that needs to be a rotating position, or if somebody wants to just sign up for like a given amount of time, we could do that as well. Is there any input from the group on how we want to handle this?
I really like the idea of rotating it, assigning someone different each meeting. But if there is anyone that would like to volunteer for it to be their normal job, of course, I don't want to take that away. And my dog agrees.
All right, go ahead, Jenny.
I can volunteer for the first one.
Great. Thank you. All right, so Jenny Hickson will take notes today, and then is everyone in favor of rotating each meeting, just assigning at the beginning of the meeting?
Yep. And we can always come up with a schedule, so we know in advance for a couple meetings in advance.
That's a great idea. Okay, good idea. Should we go ahead and do that? Would somebody like to take the next meeting?
Sure. I can take the next meeting.
Okay, great. All right. Great. And we had, so we do need to, at least, get one official meeting per month on the books. And then, we might have to meet as needed, other times, but wanted to throw out the idea. It seemed like Monday at 7 o'clock worked well for most of the council. And so would people be in favor of meeting on the fourth Monday of each month at 7 o'clock?
That works for me.
Super. All right, and I saw a nod from Adam. Jenny, does that work for you?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to getting my Zoom window set up here so I can see everyone. There we go. Okay. All right, super. And then, right, as we can schedule extra meetings as needed, if there are a lot of projects to review and so forth. And great. And then Tina had a great idea of creating some type of standardized agenda so that, we have some consistency when we're coming into each meeting and I don't fumble through the agenda too much each time. So, I think I already wrote down 3 things, kind of some of the logistics, or I guess the standard things is, starting out with the virtual meeting policy, opening the meeting, which can include that, saying the pledge, assigning a recorder, or just confirming that the recorder can take notes for that day. And then, so those are the first 3 things I have. So then, we could review action items from the previous meeting to see how those are coming along. Does that seem like a logical next step? All right. Let's see. And then, I'm sure there will be, some type of update from, that can also go, action item review, I guess, could be one thing. And then updates of certain projects or, things that are going on could be useful.
Jennifer, you may include in the pledge portion, like roll call and pledge, or pledge and roll call.
Thank you. Great idea. All right. Let's see. And I mean, in general, reviewing those action items, getting updates, probably, hopefully we'll be able to review some projects each meeting. So some type of project review, rolling up our sleeves and getting into that. Maybe discussion of any other extra projects outside of project review, whether there's, things that we're doing, activities or outreach things. And identifying new action items that might be coming on board. That was kind of the very general framework I was thinking of, but I would like to throw it out to all of you. What kind of things are missing, or is there a better way to approach this?
So one thing that I had considered was the idea of trying out a couple different process flows for how we go and assess each individual site. So I haven't had a chance to look through all of the resources that Adam sent, but I did see that sample checklist. And I think it would be valuable for us to go through the checklist each individually and kind of see if we're either going to use that as inspiration or almost take it verbatim when we start to assess things. And it might be a good idea to get our process down a little bit before we start tackling projects. And yeah, I guess that's what I think might be a wise course of action here, is to just kind of nail down our process as a group.
That's a great idea. And actually that might make sense to, I'd mentioned project review as one of like the standardized things, but maybe like for the first couple of months, what we're really doing is what you just said, like, we might have some sample projects to look at, but really we're dialing in that workflow. That's a great idea.
I think that would be a good path forward, that we can really hammer out some of the details of what we want to accomplish with the CAC.
I like that. All right. Thanks, Adam. Victoria or Jenny or Tina, Jack, Adam, you have any ideas on format?
I was going to say, I just think that Adam's idea is a good plan to really start looking at that checklist and figuring out the methodology really that we'll be using. I'm sure it's going to kind of change over time as we get more in depth with projects and find out what works best for us, but it's a good starting point.
So when I looked at this, one of the I came up with two different types of workflows that I thought might be really useful. One of the workflows would be each one of the members of the council perform their own individual assessment on one single project. So everybody is, all 5 or 7 or however many we end up having, each performs an assessment. It would be repetitive, definitely redundant by design. But I think it would also be a way to, be a holistic way of looking at something. The other process that I had considered was having everybody kind of pull out their specialties and review a project just in their specialty. And that one I think is a little less holistic, but I think it would be, I think with this group, we have enough spread out talent that might be useful. But I'm also open to other workflow ideas.
Yeah, well, I think these are great. Hold those thoughts for a few more minutes, because we'll get down to that in those action items to discuss, and we'll kind of delve into some ideas for, I like that idea of all of us kind of looking at some projects, independently, and then coming back and comparing notes. Okay. That's great.
Jennifer, one thing, there are a couple of things occur. One is to leave room for presentations from applicants or project sponsors or others, maybe other organizations, that type of thing. And then the second thing is, it may be, depending on how the council decides to work, there's Fred, it maybe assignment of, and notwithstanding what Adam is suggesting too, but kind of talking through upcoming projects and making assignments. If you do go that way, kind of having a standing agenda item for that,
Okay, that's a good idea. So I mean, I guess that could be possibly in the updates section. So if we do, kind of start out with the, kind of the logistics part at first, and then reviewing the action items, we'd have, kind of could have this general update section that could either be someone giving a presentation. Yeah, we could make that more flexible. Could be a block of time. And then after that, getting into the project review part. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's right. The update section, that would be flexible. And I'm thinking about the planning board agenda. They have the structure really revolves around sort of, if there's a public hearing up front, but then the meat of it is, old business sort of action items, or, reports on, active projects, for example, because some of this stuff might take place over multiple months. And then, there would be the planning board has a section for new business, where there, either maybe new assignments or new reports out, that type of thing. And then there's some other kind of miscellaneous sections like, presentations or updates or something. And also maybe think too, and I'm thinking again about the planning board agenda, there are going to be things that are sort of voting items. And then there are going to be things like meeting minutes. That's actually something else to think about, prior month's meeting minutes to approve. But there are going to be other things where the council is not going to take any action on necessarily that night. So that's a little bit of an unstructured spewing of the planning board's approach to this stuff, but.
There's probably always a consistent section in the planning board where they do, like they're voting on certain projects or the discussion of projects at hand in addition to all these other components.
It's mainly about, doing business and either making decisions on, submitted applications, or hearing presentations on either new applications or updates of existing applications under review.
Okay. And how long are the planning board meetings?
Those, they can last anywhere from, a half hour to a couple of hours, depending on what's going on, what timeframes, need to be hit, and then, the nature of the discussion,
Okay, great. Yeah, one thing I was wondering about, like, do we try to set an end time for this meeting each month? Is it realistic to think we can get through what we want to accomplish in 90 minutes? Do we need a full 2 hours, or is it something, that changes? If we know that we have a lot of stuff to cover, then perhaps we can extend it, but maybe having a base of an hour and a half, and, it might force us ahead of time to realize when we do have a lot to cover, and then, the week before we can say, hey, it looks like we're going to need to extend this to 2 hours and to cover it all.
I like the idea of a fixed time box with special dispensation needed for extension,
Okay.
or, maybe even a subsequent meeting if we can't fit it all in.
Makes sense to me, Jen.
Okay. Does an hour and a half sound reasonable as a base, or should we go to 2 hours as a base?
I think an hour and a half is reasonable as a base.
In this world of Zoom meetings these days, I end times are very helpful.
Yeah, I think it'll help us be more disciplined in our discussions. And if we know we got a heavy lift, we can schedule a 2 hour meeting. But I think we should be able to work with a 90-minute time window in most circumstances, I would hope.
All right.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
super. I know that we can fill the amount of time that we have, whatever that amount of time is. It's good to put limits on it. All right, so I'm hearing some great ideas. You know, we'll have some type of extra section that can be very flexible given the situation. You know, if we need presentations or want to invite someone to talk. You know, we'll have a section for project updates. You know, if we've all had like independent assignments from you know, earlier meetings, we can update on that. And then of course, the project review component. And then Tina had the good idea too of always wrapping up the meetings, you know, kind of giving an overview of what we went through. And maybe that's where the recorder can kind of help out, you know, identify those action items as you're taking notes. And so that at the end of the meeting, we can review what those action items are and make sure everyone knows what they're responsible for and so forth. And just to kind of keep that communication open. And, you know, we don't want to overwhelm anyone, but we also want to know who's doing what and that kind of thing.
Jennifer, who is going to publish the standard agenda? I've been taking notes, but I'm still not entirely sure what the standard agenda is.
That's true. Let's see. Well, do we want to go through that right now and just make sure that we have a proper or like an order that everyone feels comfortable with? Do you want to go through what you have in your notes, Jenny? Like, do you have kind of like 1, 2, 3 of what you think we've talked about? Because you're right, we have jumped around a little bit.
Then we can react to that.
Yes, let me see if I can find it. So the meeting would begin with the reading of the virtual meeting policy. Then we'd go to opening the meeting, including the pledge and roll call.
Oh, and approving minutes from the previous meeting.
Okay, then. So opening meeting includes pledge and roll call, let me say, calling the meeting to order, followed by the pledge, followed by the roll call, followed by approving the minutes or reviewing the minutes.
That sounds great.
Okay, then Adam seemed to suggest at one point old business, which would include review of current projects. Then new business, which would include any new presentations. Then discussion, open discussion, sort of. Oh, and old business would be review of current products / process, to Adam Toby's point. Before we have any projects to review, we'll be working on our process.
Okay, so that would go in the same slot, essentially.
Yeah, old business would include reviews of process or projects.
Okay.
New business would be the place where presentations would come. Would that be where public comment would be as well? Or do we need Adam is shaking his head, looking troubled. Unmute, Adam.
I would say do a separate section if any. I don't know that there's necessarily a requirement for public comment, but you probably, it seems like the planning board, for example, doesn't have public comment.
Okay.
It's probably not a bad thing to have. I know for the town board puts that up front, public comment. The comprehensive plan steering committee, you typically would put that at the end of the agenda. There, you know, it may be worth experimenting and then deciding, you know, after a few more meetings, you know.
Okay. And then a wrap up at the end, including review of action items.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put that in the notes.
And yeah, Adam, I like what you said. We can kind of modify this as we find a good flow for us, right? It's not set in stone as of today.
Oh,
Are you carving that into a stone over there?
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments or suggestions for right now
On our standard agenda.
on our standard agenda? Yeah. All right, great. Well, thanks. All right, we can move on in our current agenda to IT updates, because I know that was a big discussion at our kickoff meeting, you know, kind of throwing around all these different possibilities and needs and so forth. And I guess actually I didn't ask you ahead of time, Adam, but do you want to say anything about the IT updates?
I think if I can remember, I don't have the email in front of me. I could pull it up as we get into it. I think everybody should have received, per Megan Hart, the town's IT director and director of finance, an email address, an invite to, is that accurate? Was everybody able to at least get communication from the town about setting up an email account?
Yeah, she was very clever. She put it in those packets with the printed out NRIs. So
Okay.
no cybersecurity, no chance of hacking, which is great.
So that sounds like the ball's in the council members' court to get that kind of set up. And I think Megan is the person to contact, or you can contact me or Lisa O'Brien as well if you have problems with that. There's different platforms too that you can use. So anyway, that's email. I think that's in progress. One of the other things was Zoom. I think, Jennifer, you should have gotten an invite to Zoom. Have you gotten that invite?
Oh, that's a good question. Like just I know I got the invite for this meeting. Would it have been under your name?
I think what Megan did was used your official town email address to send your credentials.
Okay. I think I did get that. I'll have to, I'll touch base with, should I touch base with Megan on making sure that that's set up?
Yeah, I think, yeah, she's the admin for that platform. Okay. Yeah.
That's separate from the Google account, right? That's for the YouTube live streaming.
Yeah. Just also, as you're getting into the Zoom account, there's a bunch of knobs and dials and stuff in the web-based Zoom that allows you to do certain things like configure how you want meetings set up. It allows you to, for example, stream on a custom service. So there's, even after you get access, there's probably going to be some things to sort of tweak it so that it does what you expect and what you want it to do.
Okay. Oh, I did get a document, I think, about the settings and things like that for live streaming the meetings.
Yeah, and so that second email for the town's Gmail or Google account and YouTube account, that is so that you can add content and manage content on the town's YouTube presence.
Okay.
And I think probably the thing to do there is to set up some separate time, maybe with yourself and maybe a backup from the council to do some knowledge transfer and kind of get you guys going on how this works. It's fairly straightforward. There's a couple of different options, as you probably gleaned from that tutorial about how that's all set up. But yeah, so you should have the keys now But then I think the next step, you should be able to set up Zoom meetings fairly soon. But then the live streaming thing, probably we should arrange some time. Maybe we could coordinate that over email or something.
That sounds good. And I liked what you hinted at, that perhaps a second member of the council could also be like the backup holder of IT knowledge. So it's not just me. Adam, all right, I'm seeing your hand.
Volunteer.
Fall into a technical question, so I will volunteer.
Sweet. All right. So we can coordinate, Adam and I can coordinate with Adam, right? And Megan, perhaps, is Megan also involved in this then as well?
Yeah, she should be. Yeah.
Okay. And we'll find a time. It won't be this week. Sorry, but maybe next week I can find a time during business hours to do that. Cool.
Jennifer, I didn't get anything in the mail.
Oh, did you not receive your NRI hard copy yet? I just got mine
No.
yesterday. Wait, no, it wasn't yesterday because that was Sunday. I got
Saturday?
mine on Saturday.
Okay.
So it might
Maybe
still be coming.
All right, or it could have come in today's mail while I was actually in the office today for a change, so.
And it might be slower on your part of town, you know.
Yeah, well, you know.
But you should get a big, manila envelope. It feels very official. It's exciting to get mail these days. That's
I've
real.
been looking for something that matches that description for several days now, so I won't
And
miss
there's
it when it
top
comes.
secret IT information in there too, which even makes it more exciting.
Awesome.
Okay.
If I don't get it by Wednesday or Thursday, I'll let you know.
Yeah, please do. Lisa did get those out in the mail. Did everyone else get theirs? Adam, you got yours. Jenny, did you get a package in the mail with your NRI?
I did, but I wonder how to contact Megan if I have trouble logging in.
Oh, with logging in on the stuff.
Well, let me jump in here. With Megan, her email is mhart@eastgreenbush.org. And that's East Greenbush is all one word. And if you need her or anything from my office, call 518-477-4775. And Lisa O'Brien will answer that. And Megan is right around the corner, and they'll work together to get you whatever you need.
Thank you.
And the other thing is, once you get to know Megan, you could text her anytime, day or night. Her head is always in the game. It's really the truth. She's a really good employee.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Jack.
And Victoria, did you get yours?
I still have to stop by and pick it up. I think I'll
yes,
be,
you do.
I think I'll be there probably Wednesday morning to pick it up.
Okay.
And I'm guessing if Adam and I are able to schedule a meeting with Adam and Megan for next week, then you could also reach out to us as well. And, maybe if we get enough knowledge, we could probably even do like a beginning of the next meeting, like do a screen share or something and show some of the email access. Because I know, Adam, you had mentioned there is going to be a multi-factor authentication component to this. I'm guessing like a soft token app or something.
I think so, yeah. Okay. That's a Megan question, but yeah, I think.
Okay. Which just adds another step of, we have to deal with it for logging into the state system. So it's something that Fred and I are very used to, I'm sure, but it's always a headache whenever you set it up for the first time. All right, great. And I know there was a, let's see, we had also, okay, so we covered the email addresses. So those are coming. They're set up, but our access will come in your packets. The Zoom and the Google or YouTube account is set up for me to help host the meetings. I'm sorry, another email address thing. There is one generic is it CAC at East Greenbush? Was that right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great.
Did Megan give you the keys to that, Jennifer?
No, you know what? Actually, because I have not gone through the steps of setting up my account yet. So it could be in that packet, and I just don't know yet, but I will check on that before we meet with her. All right. Any questions about those logistics, IT logistics, the email accounts or Zoom? Good for
I
now.
have a IT question unless you have more.
Oh, more. I have more IT things.
Okay.
We might be getting to it.
Then I'll wait.
All right. Another thing that just Adam, I'm going through your email. So the website is another big thing that we'll be tackling, you know, over the next few months. We can do it in baby steps. But right now there's, you know, both the Natural Resources Working Group and the NRI, the Natural Resources Inventory presences on the website. So somehow we need to, you know, make a plan for consolidating those and having, you know, one Conservation Advisory Council web presence that, you know, could probably link. I mean, those are like the NRI is now a resource for the CAC in the town. So I'm guessing, you know, that can be kind of consumed underneath, or maybe not consumed, but at least linked from the CAC. I don't know how it officially will get stacked, but Megan has also offered to help us with that when we're ready to do it. So, you know, that can be, you know, maybe that's an agenda item for the next meeting, perhaps, is to start, you know, have a group discussion about how we want to, you know, tackle our web presence. Perhaps everyone can, you know, an action item could be that everyone could look at the website currently and, you know, take a peek at like how the planning board does it and what's currently there. And then we could come together next month for a discussion on how we want to proceed with it.
Jennifer, after you guys have all had a chance to go through that, maybe we should have Megan at the next meeting for at least, you know, 15 or 20 minutes if there's questions, or she can explain options and alternatives.
That's
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good, I think, for us to have her to react to, you know, I think it makes sense to try and organize these components of our charge in a way that's consistent with how other aspects of town business are organized, so that people have a consistent experience when they're looking for stuff.
That's a great idea. We don't want to like go and design something
that is like
unique.
stands out like a sore thumb in how it's organized from everything else. That's going to just throw people a curveball.
Yes. And I know there's always constraints too with whatever website platform you're using. Yeah, that's a great idea. So I can reach out. Pardon? Go ahead.
So shall we also think about content as in terms of what's the meat that we think should be on the website?
Yeah.
As well as how it's organized.
You know, I'm always a big fan of like thinking about the buckets. You know, if there's a couple of buckets of main types of information we want to, you know, get out to people. I'm thinking from like a complete website design, but, you know, it might be different since we'll essentially have one area. Like I'm guessing we can have subpages under that. And okay, so yeah, that's a good idea. You know, kind of. So let's. I mean, if everyone's okay with that, let's make that an action item for everyone. You know, just take a look at the current website and start thinking about that type of stuff. And it can change. Like I think I'm always a big fan of baby steps. The first step can be, you know, like what's our bare bones presence that we want to get up there, because that'll be something accomplishable. Like, you know, maybe we want a paragraph that describes what the Conservation Advisory Council is and links to the law, links to the NRI, and then more stuff coming soon, you know, and then we can build on that in subsequent meetings.
Makes sense to me.
Great. All right. Let's see. Oh, and I guess another good reason to have Megan attend. Adam did mention in his email that about ADA compliance within websites, and that is very new to me. So there's probably a lot to learn from her about, you know, what are some of the ways that can make the website accessible, even if you're vision impaired. Great.
There's some other things too in there about how you link and describe content and stuff. So it's it's also about how you generate content for, I haven't dove into it, but it's probably worth for the administrator in particular to kind of do a deep dive with Megan on that.
Yeah, I know that was thrown out, like to either have Megan import content that we provide her, or she can give the keys to somebody on the council, it sounded like, to do the updating. So that's something that we could discuss with her next month as well. Should I send out an email to her to see if, first we have to see if she can even attend. and
He can attend.
Oh, okay. Sounds great.
No, and I don't mean that. I don't mean that to be a jerk. Megan will be there.
Okay.
When you need her, she'll be there.
Oh, that's great. Okay, super. So another IT need was file storage. And so Adam, I know you sent me a lot of different options with that paragraph. Do you have any that you're leaning towards IT wise?
Megan was still in the process of sussing this one. I think she's also in the process of looking at the town's IT practices comprehensively as part of like a security audit. So that may also drive how the file storage works. Jack, I don't know if you want to, I'm not sure we're ready to sort of to specify a solution yet. It sounded like Megan was leaning toward, there's Microsoft OneDrive, which I think would link also to the town's a Microsoft shop. So
Okay.
that might link the town's infrastructure a little bit more seamlessly to any cloud environment. But I think that one's still in progress.
Okay, that's fine. For the time being, like I'm happy to, do things with my shared or like a Google Drive and a shared folder and so forth. And then we can just transfer that once we get, some type of access, until Google starts yelling at me that I'm out of storage space, and then we'll work from there. All right. And then the other thing was GIS access. So Adam, you want to talk to that as well?
Yeah, so the town does have an organization account. I don't know enough about how Esri, so I presume that what you guys are going to want is, you're probably going to want two levels. One that has kind of an easily displayable and maybe a public facing side. And then you may also want, like the full ArcMap, like you might have on your desktop to actually create and manipulate data. So to some extent, it's going to be requirements driven. And I understand a little bit more about how Esri, their cloud environment works and their accounts work. But like, I think if you had your own Esri account, you could get associated with the town's organizational account. There are only a few different roles and stuff. So in short, I think probably the best thing would be to speak with an Esri representative. They have their customer relationship managers, or account reps or whatever. And maybe one of the action items, or at least something to give Esri and undergird that conversation is, what do you want to do first? Like, do you want to be able to update the NRI maps with more current data? Do you want to get those out on the public website? Do you want to work toward creating that sort of parcel or address searchable, location-based resource searching? It seems like there's several different ways to do that. And of course, it may not make sense to link to the town's organization account either. It may make sense to have more of a free I think there's nonprofit related licenses as well. So that's another thing to kind of, that Esri, I think would help solution.
Do you know, does the town have a certain number of named accounts for Esri?
What's interesting with the Esri stuff is, like, there's sort of the admin side, like an individual side. Like I can go in and I can admin the town's platform. And then there's the organization account, which is like the platform. And within the organization account, that's where, that's where like you spend down your credits when you use up cloud storage, or create reports, like certain types of reports cost credits, or have other types of add-on things that cost money. But also there's different roles in there that apparently you can share the roles among different people as long as they have that access. So like there's like a creator and like a high level role, and then there's like a field worker role, and then there's a couple of others. So it may be that we have another separate creator role under the town's organization account that sort of works with the CAC data stuff, and also creating those boundaries between, because they would need to be semi-porous, right? Because you would want to be able to pick up some of the MS4 data and vice versa. We would want to do the same. So we'd want to like have all of the definitive data in one place, but there's going to be CAC stuff over here that like the MS4 people aren't going to need to touch, But to answer your question, I think that you could basically have just one creator role and everybody from the CAC shared. I even think you can have multiple people logged in simultaneously on that same account.
Okay. So you were saying that perhaps it'd be good for someone to talk to Esri to just kind of find out what the options are.
And I think Megan, myself, and then the Esri person, I can engage them, and then somebody from the CAC, that would probably be a good start. And then I mean, my thought would be to have like some high level requirements defined initially, and it's stuff like create layers, import layers, create data points, manipulate attribute tables, publish stuff out on the web, share across other town units, and we can work together to kind of, I could take a first crack at that, or if you guys wanted to, and then Megan and I can, we can all meet and engage and kind of kick that around a little bit before meeting with Esri. So, we kind of know what we're looking for.
Right. Okay. And Adam, Toby, you have a strong GIS background, right? That's your.
I have a. I wouldn't call it strong, but I have some GIS experience, so I would definitely be the one involved with that conversation, or at least I would want to be.
Great. Okay.
I'm also not opposed to doing some research on my own on QGIS, which is an open source GIS platform that is free to use. We haven't touched on anything about cost of Esri, but I know that the ArcGIS and ArcMap can be cost prohibitive. So I can look into QGIS and see if that's something that that might be a stepping stone for us in the meantime. If that's something anybody's interested in, or we could just go straight to the ArcGIS. I know, Adam, you had mentioned wanting to keep things kind of concurrent with the town's platforms as it is. So if you don't want to look into QGIS, I would understand completely there.
It occurs to me, yeah, I think we're becoming, and we have been, an Esri shop. And we're using, we're using it more now than we had for a while. I think the benefit of what you're talking about may be in terms of sort of the spatial analysis and, doing a little bit more kind of creating of layers that then get consumed into the town's platform and either maintained there or shared there. Because that would avoid the more costly site license or whatever for the more like ArcMap, that the desktop fat client stuff. But I think that there are nonprofit licenses for even for that side. So that's another thing we can, the Esri folks can probably weigh in on.
Yeah, I mean, Esri I don't know if they still do it, but they used to do $100 license for conservation well, maybe it had to be a conservation nonprofit. Well, no, actually I knew a group who was not an official nonprofit that was able to take advantage of that. So that might be an option as well if they do still have that, and if the Conservation Advisory Council could qualify, we might be able to get in on something like that.
My wife Sarah works for a land trust, and I'm pretty sure they pay a good buck for their
Oh, do they?
for her seat. Yeah.
Okay. But if the town's already paying something, like I wonder if, I mean, can they just tack on other, Esri probably makes it hard to get deals because that's their business model.
Esri does charge per user for that.
Yeah.
For the pricing schedule that I had last looked at, but I could be mistaken.
But longer term, you guys need to decide what you need to do the job.
Mm-hmm.
Because the good news is Megan also helps me prepare the budget. So for next year's budget, it's one thing you should, Jennifer, keep in mind as you move forward. What do you need?
Mm.
So we can figure that out. If access to Esri or anything else is a problem, we'll solve it. We'll give you what you need to do it.
Thanks. That's super helpful. And we can, I guess if Adam, if you're exploring this over the next month or two and, report back to us, and, in the meantime, as a group, we can be deciding like, what is it that we really want to accomplish with GIS resources? And, I'm in favor of trying to get these beautiful NRI maps into a public sphere, like some type of, online interactive map. I feel like that would be a great first step. It'd be something that the community could start using right away. And then, but listing out those kind of things, like, we'll want to go bigger at some point. Maybe we do need to make updates. I guess, yeah, that's something that we had, right? Didn't we have that in the NRI, the recommendation to revisit the maps and make updates periodically? So that's going to be more, more intensive, resource intensive than just hosting it on an ArcGIS Online account. It'll be like editing the maps. So yeah, we should probably list out what we need to, what are our goals for that. I'm kind of envisioning that we're going to have this ongoing list, and I'm not sure quite how to keep track of these yet. An ongoing list of things that, we don't really solve exactly like within a month, but we just need to, keep pushing them along and making sure that they get addressed, at some point.
Or checking in and asking ourselves, is our approach working, functioning, or do we need to, or is it dysfunctional? We need to do something different or better.
Yeah, great point. So I don't know, Ginny, if you have a way to, I guess, mark on your notes, like somehow we need to flag certain topics as kind of ongoing things that will keep evolving. And I feel like GIS needs are going to be one of them. The website will probably be an ongoing evolving need. things like the IT needs, I feel like those are kind of once and done. Like once we get all set up, we can all move on from those. But these other things are going to keep coming up. And the checklist, like that, Adam, Toby, you'd mentioned earlier, like that's something that's probably going to be evolving as well. It's, we'll have a straw man at first, but we'll keep perfecting it essentially as we go along project through project.
Yeah, so I mean those could be standing items under old business is how I would see that fitting in.
Perfect wording for it. Thank you.
And if we get to IT problems and you can ask us, what's not working or what's working well, and if there's nothing, if everything's working well, we just move on to the next item. But at least it's a reminder for us to check in on that.
Great. All right. Well, it looks like the IT updates actually led into the action items to discuss, like the website task, the checklist for project review. So we kind of, Adam, Toby, you had started throwing out some ideas, which sounded really good to, start going through those resources that I put into that Adam gave us. I put into that shared folder, and perhaps we want to, have an initial discussion about that next month to, start putting down on, some type of process, some type of workflow on how we're going to do this. It would be great also to, I don't know what order to do all this stuff in. We have those great example or the resources. Do we also want some type of example project at this point, or do we want to get through those resources first and kind of get our idealized process in mind, and then have Adam throw us a project to start reviewing?
You're talking about the resources that you sent around this weekend, Jennifer.
Right.
I had a chance to look at them briefly, and I particularly liked the checklist as a good, again, kind of the same idea, and everything on there might not apply to a given project, but I worry about forgetting something. That's a good, okay. And like you said, I'm sure we will modify it at some point, but at first glance, I thought that was a pretty good checklist. Great.
Yeah, so next meeting, we could, kind of take a crack at a stab at creating our own. We could go through that step by step and see how well that applies. Maybe we do just kind of copy and paste from what has worked from other areas, but get our own draft checklist out there so that we can give it a test drive with a real project.
Hey, Jennifer, I'm going to check out here.
Okay.
Because it's problematic for me how I should relate to this council. Because what I want to be able to do is give you what you need to do the job. What I don't want to do is influence you in any other way. And so I'll keep checking in with you. If you need anything, let me know. And moving forward, I probably won't attend a lot of meetings unless you need me. And if you ever invite me to attend a meeting, I will certainly attend it. But you guys, we pick really, really good people. And what I'd like to do is get you what you need to do the job and turn you loose. And you'll never see me looking over your shoulder. But if you need me, call me and I'll be there every time. All right. And Victoria, if you don't come get your NRI, I'm going to drop it off on the way home one day. So if that's easier for you, let me know.
Oh, it's okay. I'm sure I'll see you on Wednesday, like I said.
Okie doke. Okay.
Thank you.
But it's nice to see you guys. And once again, since Jenny Hickson wasn't here for the last meeting, let me say it so she can hear it. Thank you guys so much for doing this. The NRI is gorgeous. This whole thrust is such a feather in the cap of the town, and it it's one of these things that makes us special. So we really appreciate that you guys are here and that you're doing this. So if you need anything, let me know. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for being so supportive of it.
You're welcome. And good night, everybody.
Good night.
And then,
I'm actually going to sign off now too. You know, I'm available if anybody needs me. If you don't have my cell phone number already, I think I gave it to Jennifer. Call me or email me and I'll give you my cell phone. Anybody can reach out to me. But thanks everyone for such great work. What a great first meeting. Thanks for including me. And I'll be popping in and out. I'm your liaison to the board if you need anything. Okay.
Thanks, Tina.
Bye.
Thanks, Tina.
have a good night. Thank you.
All right. Great. So let's see. I'm just trying to look. I'm looking at the action or the agenda that we've put out. I think we've covered everything on those action items, and I want to give Adam enough time to give us a planning board 101. So here in just a minute, I feel like we should go ahead and turn over to him. But one other thing that I threw onto the action items to discuss was calendars. You know, essentially, I just want to make sure that we're not missing any meetings that we should be attending at this point. And maybe this will come up in the planning board discussion that you're about ready to give us, Adam. Like, should we be putting these types of meetings on our calendars and, you know, kind of assigning different CAC members to, like, should there always be a representative at the planning board or zoning meetings, you know, just as kind of a commonplace, something that we rotate through?
I think in the last meeting we had discussed it would be a good idea early on to make a point that the town planning board gets to see our faces and make that, you know, initial connection, since we're going to be working so closely with them on these issues.
Yeah,
And,
that's
I kind of feel like besides actually like you said, kind of meeting with the planning board and really starting to work with them so they know who we are, the best way we can move forward. I think it is probably really nice at the moment with everything being on Zoom and now everything is on YouTube, that maybe what we do end up doing in the future is we rotate, just like we do with the recording position, rotate someone to, they don't necessarily have to be at the meeting on the time, but they can always review the meeting and bring up anything to the rest of the CAC before our next meeting, if that makes sense to everyone else.
Yeah, that sounds good. And thanks, Fred, for reminding us that, yeah, I'd forgotten that we said that we would do some type of, if possible, do some type of joint meeting, at least, you know, just for a few minutes so that the planning board could kind of get to know us and we can get to know them. And that would be a good way to kick it off so they're not surprised by some people, you know, kind of lurking on the side of Zoom.
And that might argue for rotating too, if, you know, because they meet twice a month. So, you know, in a couple of months, they will have seen everybody, you know, and vice versa too. They may, you know, it may make sense for some, you know, the chair or others to come, you know, to come here and yeah.
Once we've gotten our process straightened out and we're getting into meat and potatoes, I assume you mean.
Yeah, and also, I guess, as you're establishing it too, you know, so that, you know, and maybe it's sort of, if you guys have questions or you're kind of, maybe once you sort of solidify it, that's when either the joint meeting occurs or you invite a rep to come and say, hey, listen, this is what we're thinking. This is when you can expect, this is the types of contact, the types of products, you know, and just sort of vet that once you've got that sussed out more.
That's a great idea. Well, with that, Adam, do you want to give us a little background?
Yeah, the meeting cycle I did not get into, Jennifer, so hopefully it'll get better from here. I threw together a short it's longer than it looks, or it's shorter than it looks, just to kind of organize this. And I also included some links and stuff in here, so I'll share this thing so you guys have the hyperlinks to the resources.
Great.
From the beginning. So I called this, local land development review process, because there's really, from the top, there's a lot of different ways that this can get structured. And so I wanted to kind of, in each locality, some municipalities never pass a zoning or a site plan review law, and others have all of that. And even, you go to different municipalities, it's going to be a little bit different in each place. So the first part of this is about the types of applications, the boards that are involved, and then I'll talk a little bit about the procedures associated with each type. And then there's a few considerations I wanted to toss in there at the end, because there's stuff it's not codified. It's not necessarily, written down anywhere that it's required, but it's important to know. I probably should have put that meeting calendar on there. So the first thing to know is that the New York State town law sets up the structure for much of what we do at the local level. And that starts with the comprehensive plan and goes through zoning, sets out subdivision and site plan review standards, basic standards. It talks about, procedures. It sets forth certain requirements about, say, for example, types of infrastructure that might be required as part of a subdivision. The comprehensive plan really sets the stage for all of this. And so, it's this section is not really, you don't necessarily refer to this on a day-to-day basis, but it's good to know because, the comprehensive plan is really not just necessarily one piece, one document, but there's a whole number of other studies and reports that are adopted and that sort of become part of that framework. And the big message here is that zoning must be in accordance with the comprehensive plan. So, and then once you get into each of these sections, and I'll just pick up the subdivision review, like it gets into a lot of detail here. So, you're talking about monuments, streets and highways be of sufficient grade, lands for parks, and all of this stuff. And then, so that's at the high state level that allows municipalities. It sets, I don't even know if it's bare bones. It's permissive on the one hand. I wouldn't necessarily regard it as a basement. It doesn't get into a lot of detail on a lot of things that you really do need, but it sets up that framework to consider that. So we'll get into each of these, but that's the New York State town law enabling legislation. So underneath that, there's local laws and regulations. And so I put kind of the core documents that that I think comprise the town's framework. Again, starting with the comprehensive plan that we're in the process of updating right now. This plan was done in 2006, and it was really oriented toward land use. So you don't see a lot about, economic development, for example. It keeps failing on me. It sets forth these character areas, and it starts to sort of detail provides a little bit more detail for the corridor and that type of stuff. So within each of these areas, it sets forth various recommendations. So, and those are kind of, it talks about a vision. And so it's important to know that this is out there and that it can, in certain cases, hook up with individual developments, in detail. But in general, this should always be behind the review of development proposals in town. So that's there. Let's see. The comprehensive zoning law is, and when I say related documents, there are various corridor studies, like the Route 4 corridor study, also done in 2006. We're starting to update that this year. There was one for 9 and 20 that's way out of date. There was kind of a draft final that was never adopted for 9 and 20, and a portion of Route 4. There's also, so that one probably has a little bit lower stature in this. There's also the town's amenities plan that talks about parkland and those types of, trails and making connections and that type of stuff. So that's what I mean by related planning documents. So there is this kind of framework out there. So then the comprehensive zoning law was passed, of course, after this. And this document is this is the bread and butter of what I do, and especially what the Building and Codes Department does. And it was adopted here. It's going to keep doing this. And there's a couple of key points in here. The zoning map is technically part of this, and it's up here in the front. But then there's a separate link on our webpage that shows, all of the zoning that you can really zoom in on. It's pretty high resolution. And you can see there's multiple zones, right? There's the CI, there's the ROS, residential buffer. It's got the overlay zone for watercourse management. And so when you go, there's the requisite sort of purpose, intent, and all of that up here. I'm not sure that you guys will get too much into the uses allowed in here, but there, it's important to know that these uses really, those are permitted uses. It's not like excluded uses. So anything that's not permitted is, in theory, not allowed there. So there's other development standards and stuff for things like flag lots that relate to subdivisions. And when this is called comprehensive, this is comprehensive. There's all kinds of stuff in here that isn't just zoning and isn't just, this is a typical district regulation where you have, this is important, I think, especially for you guys. What is the intent of the district? Here are the permitted uses. These are special permit uses. We'll get into those. Accessory uses. These cannot be primary uses on a lot, but they're allowed. Here are the area and bulk standards. How tall can buildings be? How much can the lot be covered? So there's that. And then there's also, there in certain districts, there are specific district standards. So, in this office commercial, there's specific standards for various things that sometimes are more stringent or are unique to that district. There's overlay districts. We'll talk about PDDs a little bit, but that section is in here. Both the procedure as well as some of the substantive requirements. And then there are these town-wide standards for parking and loading. There's standards for parking and for landscaping. There's a separate standard, set up for landscaping. So And that relates to preservation of existing sites and that type of stuff. There's the whole complicated set of sign regulations. We never got to design standards. There's recommended design practices that are kind of codified in here that are worth referring to. Performance standards are kind of like how much noise can it emit. And then there's specific standards for certain uses. And now we start to get into the kitchen sink aspect of this. This residential cluster development, this is one of those things that's enabled by the state enabling statutes. It allows the planning board essentially to modify the area and bulk standards to accomplish certain goals related to open space. So that's in here. There's other types of standards and stuff. Another kind of important part of this, and again, the kitchen sink, is erosion and sediment control. This was originally required that the town pass as part of the MS4 permit, or municipal separate storm sewer system. But now it's located within the comprehensive zoning law. So that's the idea. So that's in here. And this sets out standards for steep slopes and the how land disturbance can occur, for regulate. And a lot of this hooks up to the New York State DEC standards for the stormwater design and the Blue Book for erosion and sediment control. So, but this also allows the town to do things like inspect and all of that. So that's an important section. And then this is kind of the general administration. So this talks about the role and responsibility and duties of the code enforcement officer. The zoning board of appeals setup is in here. There's a couple of updates that have been made here to this that change what the ZBA does, but the planning board's authority is in here. And this is kind of an important section. This site plan review section 4.3.1 talks about the procedure, but also these substantive requirements, for not only applications for preliminary site plan, but it has like a checklist in here. So in any event, and then the last kind of thing is these definitions. So if you are like, well, what does this mean? You can come in here and these definitions are important. So what does a resort mean? Well, this is how it's defined. So so that's kind of a whistle stop tour. That one's important. And that's just so I guess that it's there. You'll have the location. It has been amended. The solar law has amended it so that allows for certain types of solar installations. There are things like sunset clauses that have been added for site plans and planned development districts. And one thing that's important is the comprehensive zoning, the map, is amended by these planned development districts, which are actually, they're rezoning. So they sort of follow a separate procedure, but the idea is to have an integrated, plan for a site, and the town board can rezone and relax or apply different standards that might not otherwise allow the thing to be built without under the conventional zoning. The land subdivision regulations are also out on the town's website. We've created kind of this is the official copy. And you can see kind of, there's a procedural section. There's a required improvements for certain types of subdivisions, for major subdivisions. There's design standards, there's submission requirements. Here's where clustering comes in again. And then there's procedures for like waivers and stuff. And, it looks like not that much, but when you get into like some of just as an example, of the some of the standards for, here's subdivision design standards, the lots must be buildable. Here's stuff for corner lots, for side yard lots, access from public streets, parks and open space. There's other standards in here for public utilities and that type of stuff. So just to be aware that that's out there, and it's really, the planning board applies that in its review of subdivision proposals. There's other local laws that kind of you might encounter, like grading and filling, mining, erosion and sediment control, we talked about a little bit. There's a wetlands local law on the books that is probably worth revisiting. But those are in the town's, the wider town code that you may, that sort of form part of the local regulatory system. So these are the application types. And so just generally, subdivision is either creating new lots, it's generally creating new lots or new configure in number or in their configuration. So if we'll start with the small, so lot line adjustment is, I just want to move the lot line, between my neighbor and my parcel. That's it's a lot line adjustment. It's a type of subdivision. A minor subdivision is 4 lots or less. There's some, and so you're creating, basically 2 to 4 lots. Major subdivisions are anything more than, or 5 or more lots. And basically the distinction here, these are subject to a much higher level of review and standards in the code, and typically require the installation of public infrastructure. Their site plan review is, basically there's, with certain exceptions, it's required when you either change use on a site or make modifications to a site. So there are certain exceptions for like single family and duplexes, for certain agricultural activities, certain maintenance activities are exempt. But in general, if if I'm a commercial business and I want to, add on to my existing building, I'm going to have to go through site plan review and approval before I get a building permit. And there are different levels of this. Modification is basically like, I want to, maybe add a sign and some landscaping. A minor site plan might be like a parking expansion, or under our current code involving installation of a building less than 4,000 square feet. Major is anything more than that. Plan development districts, I talked a little bit about those, and they can be amended in certain ways. But those, we'll get into the procedure in a minute, but it's enough to know that those are out there. Those are a thing, those are an application that we can receive for review. Special use permits are, essentially, these are uses that, due to the potential for being incompatible with the surrounding neighborhood, they're subject to a higher level of review. So there's like 7 additional criteria that the planning board has to apply. There's a public hearing requirement. But that's another type of application. Variances are basically, you're asking for relief either from a decision of the code enforcement officer or from the comprehensive zoning law. And so there are 2 types of relief that can be granted. One is an area variance, which, you say you want to, say you have a lot, but you can't build on it because the setbacks are too small. So the building inspector denies you, and then you come in front of the ZBA for an area, for relief from that setback requirement. Use variances are different, and that's saying basically that I need to do a use on this property that's not allowed, And the standard there really is that the zoning law amounts to a taking of private property. So you have to show that all uses that are allowed are basically not economical. There's a really high bar for those. And then the final kind of application is an interpretation of the comprehensive zoning law. So, you know, a developer might ask, well, does a site plan apply to this type of application? And then there might be some disagreement, and they might petition the ZBA, or I might petition the ZBA to interpret that. And then that has the force of precedent. So of these types, the planning board is responsible for subdivision, site plan. They get involved in plan development district review, and then they're also responsible for special use permits. The town board we have a kind of a practice where the town board is responsible ultimately for major subdivisions. So that's basically buildings with 4,000 square gross floor area or larger. I put these in italics because our code is kind of, it's more practice that this is delegated to the planning board, and major definitely goes. So when you do a major site plan, you're in town board territory. The reason that the planning board is up here is that they're involved. Basically, the planning board does the technical review of a major subdivision, whereas, and they basically issue a recommendation to the town board, whereas the planning board typically retains, authority over these to approve or disapprove minor modifications. Conversely, the town board is absolutely responsible for plan development, for new plan development districts and so-called major amendments. Basically, these are local laws that the town board passes and amount to a rezoning. And it's unlike site plan subdivision review. The plan development district is discretionary. The town board is under no obligation to accept or approve these plan development districts. Whereas if I show that I meet the subdivision or site plan requirements or both, I have an argument that I should get approval. There is some discretion, but this is totally discretionary. It's a legislative act by the town board. And then minor amendments are those that the code enforcement officer determines are minor in nature, and there's some standards in there, and those just go through the planning board. The ZBA or Zoning Board of Appeals is responsible for these, for variances and interpretations. And the thing to think about the ZBA is it's a quasi-judicial body. So they're basically a review board. So it's a little bit of a different procedure. They build a different type of record. And, they're sort of focused a lot on precedent, and that type of thing. So, and they, like other boards, but in particular here, they do that sort of the judicial function of balancing the equities in a lot of cases, and they have certain standards that they have to apply to review these as well. So just quickly, a procedural overview here. Lot line adjustments are, basically, as long as you have an approved plat, that'll get approved in like one meeting. You come to the planning board, you present your thing, you fill out a complete application, and it's pretty straightforward typically. Minor and major subdivisions require, both of them require public hearings, and there's typically there's an initial sketch plat, then there's a preliminary plat, and then there's a final plat review phase. In the case of minor subdivisions, a lot of time that gets compressed into a couple of applications and sort of back and forth with an applicant. Whereas with major subdivisions, you are talking about preliminary plat approval and then final plat approval. So, you know, but they all proceed from a complete application, and then the planning board applies those review criteria. Site plan, minor modification is another thing that typically takes, both of these are $200 review fees. They typically will take one meeting, maybe two. A minor site plan, you know, it depends on the type and what's involved. But those typically are, you know, they're smaller projects that don't involve, you know, like, you know, Stewart's, for example, when it added on to its house, it added like a cooler and some related site improvements recently. That was a minor site plan. A couple of rounds of review. If it's a commercial site with some stuff going on, you know, there might be a little bit more of a review involved. If it's, you know, maybe a reuse with a small expansion of an existing site and no real site improvements required beyond additional building, that might be a little bit less complicated. No public hearing is required or typically is done for either of these. For major site plan, and these are handled at the planning board level. For major site plan, our practice right now, there's an option for a public hearing. Practice right now is to have a public hearing at both levels, and both boards get involved. The planning board, like I said, does the technical detailed review, makes a recommendation of the town board. The town board typically I mean, they issue the approval and or approval with conditions and that type of stuff. This again is this is a rezoning. There's all of the typically you're going to have, you might have subdivision as part of this. You might have major site plan as part of this. Typically there wouldn't be special use permit review. But this also involves a legislative act. So you're talking about the process to create a new local law. So, and then there are specific procedural standards set forth in the zoning law for how this happens. But again, that's a town board function with the planning board doing a lot of the technical and advisory work. This is pretty much exclusively the planning board per a recent amendment to the zoning law. So our zoning law is a little bit out of date in terms of what's on the website, but this goes through the planning board, not the ZBA. And this requires a public hearing. Oftentimes what'll happen is these get combined together. So you'll see special use permit and major site plan approval kind of as part of the same application. And the review is sort of integrated for efficiency and because things relate to one another and that type of thing. And I mentioned the standards that the planning board has to apply here, basically related to neighborhood compatibility. These variances, I believe it's the same. Once you have a complete application, there's a public hearing requirement. There's also a notice requirement for property owners within a certain distance of the subject property. So we have to send out certifieds. For all of these, with the exception of subdivision, there's also a separate review that the county planning department does called 239M. So that also is bound up. They review all variances. They review some of these applications. So this is typically a 60 to 75-day process to get the stuff scheduled, the public hearing noticed, all the legal notices out and all that stuff. So, but typically once it comes in front of the board, everything's all done. The board does the hearing, the ZBA, and then they address the application. And it's pretty much done in one meeting for most types of applications, unless there's a major piece of new information, then the ZBA might hold the public hearing open to receive new information. Interpretations are handled, once there's a complete application, we do a public hearing notice, but since typically it's not involving a specific property, there's really no, we're not noticing the whole town with a certified mailing. So, and these kind of take different flavors depending on what's going on. There could be a lot of more information required. We don't do these very often, but it's important to know that it's in there. Quickly to run through as an example of what you guys will encounter as part of a project, this is on Planning and Zoning's website, and this is the land development application that we require all applicants to fill out. Right now, with the exception of special use permits and variances, those have different applications. But this is for, this has some special use stuff in it, but there's a separate application that we also have that accompanies it. So one thing that's important to note with this is that the property owner is always the applicant, but oftentimes what you'll have are developers with, say, an option to buy a piece of property. The property owner will sign over the rights to represent them in front for purposes of a land development project. But the property owner is the ultimo hombre. They will often sometimes also sign over representation to like their design engineer or some other representative. So that's important to know. But from this, you'll get basic information about zoning district, project name. This is where we kind of get that stuff. The type of stuff they're seeking. Does it require extension of public utilities, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's some other stuff about stormwater management. This thing relates to our grading and filling local law. So if they're grading or filling anything more than a half an acre, it triggers a review in accordance with that part of the code. Talking about SWIP and stuff like that. And then there's also the fees are set forth in here. Sometimes we hire experts to do review. So there's provisions related to kind of informing applicants. This is mitigation fees. I didn't talk about too much of that. We can get into that if you have questions. It's an important part of the town's system. But it's more about mitigating the effects of development. I think the GEIS is probably worth a separate conversation on some level. This is about stormwater, and there's some other stuff in here. The last thing that's important for you guys is this environmental assessment form. So what we've done is the DEC maintains the environmental mapper, which the EAF mapper, which fills out certain fields and is the definitive source for things like archaeological sensitivity and location within historic areas, proximity to federally regulated wetlands or other, I think, state regulated wetlands as well. So we require applicants per this memo to use the EAF mapper to fill out these forms. And so I'll just show you an example. It also spits out a report that talks about that provides metadata basically for so this is the EAF mapper summary report that thing spits out, and we ask be included. And so these are all of the things that the mapper, all the data sets it queries. So it's, that's an important thing, because we know when we see this, we're getting the definitive data for what the mapper can do. And we'll get into this, but this is a long form EAF. Typically these are required. We'll get into it, but there's a lot of information about the project on here. So, but as part of our standard application, we require this short form that, the applicant fills out and describes what they're, and it has these basic section of questions about different types of potential impacts. So we use this to start the seeker process. So, this is the short form. Basically, the guidance is to not unduly burden applicants. In almost all cases, except for certain actions under seeker, this short form is the one that should be required and filled out. So that's an important part of the application. I typically will check this to make sure that it's accurate and we have the right information as part of our review of this stuff. This thing is annoying. So that's the application. And that's where it is. One thing quickly on seeker, and this is kind of the key thing, no agency involved in any action may undertake, fund, or approve the action until it has complied with the provisions of seeker. A project sponsor may not commence any physical alteration related to an action until the provisions have been complied with certain exceptions. So basically, everything, no activity should be taking place until this is the lead agency's responsibilities are discharged. And the action involves typically the exercise of discretion. This is the, so with certain exceptions, the planning, land development applications, typically we review against these requirements and criteria. And the part 617, so there's the state SECRA, the act, and then there's the DEC regulations that sit underneath that and implement everything. And they just went through a change like in 2019, I think. So this is a link to that stuff. Within that, seeker is really a procedural thing. So it sets forth requirements for how a lead agency is determined, what types of actions they must review and according to what procedures, and how an environmental impact statement is prepared, and how an agency, when required, makes findings when they do when they make a seeker determination, whether that's a negative declaration or a positive declaration and a statement of findings that accompanies that. So without getting too much into this, the actions type 1 are more likely to require the preparation of an environmental impact statement. So like, I think just, rezoning of 20 or more acres in town, for example, or connecting to, I forget, certain number of housing units to a municipality without water and sewer. Those automatically are type 1. Basically, that means that from a procedural standpoint, you have to coordinate the review with other agencies. But it also sets up the presumption that an environmental impact statement is more likely to be required. Unlisted actions are, so type 2 is everything that is not subject to review under seeker. This includes things like the granting of individual area variances, individual lot line set adjustments, decisions by the code officer, studies that agencies undertake. There's a whole list of like, I don't know, more than 24 actions. So if it's on that list, basically the planning board can say, well, it's exempt from seeker under this provision. So we don't do any more seeker review. Sometimes we'll get into, if there's an issue, like say there's groundwater contamination on an adjacent Superfund site, and it might be a type 2 action, but we might, I don't know who this is that entered, but we might under the town's police power, review that in a little more detail. Unlisted actions are everything that's not type 1 or type 2, and that's a pretty broad cast As a matter of course, we coordinate the review. So we identify of all actions that require review. So I was thinking about this, I think the CAC is probably an involved agency under seeker. I think I would take that stance at this point. But basically we send out that, and then they send their responses, any comments they might have, or if they contest the determination of the town being lead agency or something, which never really happens. EAFs, the part 1 is filled out by the applicant. Now I showed you a couple examples. Part 2 and 3 are filled out by the lead agency. And that's basically where part 2 is a list of all of the potential impacts, whether it's short or long, and then will a significant impact occur or not? And so there's just a checkbox. And then the part 3 is the place where the lead agency makes its determination of significance. So if it issues a neg deck or a negative declaration on an unlisted action, there's a place in there to justify that and say, well, we identified the potential for, plowing under prime farmland, but it's only a small amount, and this was a small parcel that was, or whatever. So you can make, certain statements about why some of those impacts are not significant. And then another important thing is establishing lead agency. And so typically in town, the planning board is lead agency on subdivision review and minor site plan modification, special use permits. The town board is lead agency on major site plans. There's a bunch of other different types of actions, but those are town board is automatically also, I believe, lead agency under planned development districts. The ZBA, when it's required to go through seeker, is the lead agency on variances. And I mentioned coordinated review. Basically, this is where you're not required under unlisted, but we do it anyway. Where we say, okay, well, what types of permits might be involved? Does it need a DOT permit, some permit from DPW for connecting to the water system? Is Rensselaer County Health involved? So we send the project file out to them, and they get a chance to look at it and make comments and stuff. So this is kind of the catch-all for the other considerations. And I just wanted to mention the board agendas and minutes for all 3 boards are out on the town's website, and they're a good resource for, sort of prior discussions. And they're also maintained in our office, older stuff. So just if, and that's eventually where your stuff is going to be too, I think. One thing, we can talk a little bit more about this before applications, and I think we maybe mentioned this a little bit, but we have a forum where we have a pre-application conference with applicants to, with certain town officials and staff, to identify pitfalls and issues substantively, and then to get procedurally a path through the process for applicants. And so I think this is one of those meetings where you may want a standing representative, or at least to seriously consider it based on individual agendas. And we can get into more of that, but this is kind of important. It's a really valuable forum. It kind of, there's a lot of skilled, experienced, knowledgeable people around the table with a lot of authority too. And then it also kind of sets the tone for certain things. So it's very good to get people to avoid surprises. And this is one way we're able to do that. The next thing is sort of town designated engineers and other consultants. Depending on the type, like say there's a stormwater pollution prevention plan involved, we're always going to get a TDE reviewing that. So, but they may not have a role on a minor subdivision. We can do that in-house, for example. So they don't always get involved, but for big projects where we don't have the resources, it's an extension of resources. It allows us to access to new resources. It allows us access to viewpoints that, these folks are, they maintain their licenses. They are required to undergo professional development hours. So in theory, they bring a current perspective on issues. And they basically will assist either the planning board or the town board. They really work through my shop, and I coordinate and manage the TDEs and our sort of pre-qualified list, but they ultimately, their findings go and are reviewed and approved, sort of incorporated into the process by whichever board is responsible. We sometimes also have other consultants like, we have a seeker special counsel who will help us where there's more of a complicated seeker process, or where it involves coordination between the planning and the town board, for example, on like a major site plan. We can talk about our role if you guys have questions. I mean, we support a lot of this, from the logistics of getting meetings noticed to reviews, to paying these guys, to being the ombudsman for applicants and sponsors and all that. So the MS4 program, or municipal separate storm sewer, is another thing to be kind of aware of. It's about water quality at the end of the day. And so we do, that's the program lives in planning and zoning. That's important. That's probably worth a whole separate thing on it. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was sort of after approval, there's the construction phase. We're not done once we review this stuff. It goes in the ground, and that's a really, really critical phase. And there's this whole, we can set up the best plan, but if we don't have the right resources looking at it and overseeing what's installed and how it's built and what disturbances, it really, this is important. So I'm not sure what role the CAC might have in that, but it's something to really think about, because we don't have enough resources. People have financial incentives to do the most expedient, cost efficient thing. And it's, we go through these processes. You guys will contribute to these processes. And if it doesn't get built as it was per plan, that's a problem. So this is a critical time. I just wanted to make sure and mention that. And then I just threw together, in addition to the stuff that, the citations and the other stuff, these are, this Kuhn Technical Series is, and I'll just click this one. This is absolutely a wonderful resource for, municipal option. They have outstanding discussion of subdivision review. This is a really, really good resource for, and they have, it's an explainer, it's a, it's a citation, it goes into some of the case law. So I would, as you have questions about the process, or if you're like, well, this doesn't make sense, why are we doing this? There's a lot of them look like this, and they're kind of more bare bones, but still really packed with information. And, you can kind of, they have these neat little flow charts, and, you can get a sense of what ought to be happening. There's an open space planning guide and stuff. So, some of it's dated, but that's a really, really good sort of background. And then like CDRPC has a lot of data, if you're interested, and there's a lot of other resources on their website. This is kind of a useful PACE has a really good land use center, law center. And so if you're looking to kind of delve into a question in the legal aspects of it, this is a kind of a good place to start. And then, the seeker handbook, one of my former employers, I think worked with the DEC to to develop this. And this is basically this is a kind of a much more detail about what is required under various types of actions. And, may a short EAF ever be used in place of a full EAF for type 1? No. There's kind of these really important kind of statements on how this law and the regulations are to be applied. And there's also another thing. This is the seeker handbook. I didn't put this in here, but there's also, I think it's the EAF workbook. And actually, Nan definitely helped to contribute to this. And these are, where are this? So, these are really, really wonderful resources for, filling out, trying to identify impacts. Where the heck is it where she talks about how but this will help you walk through from soup to nuts, looking at like impact assessment, scale and context. And then it goes into each question, like, does it conflict with, so as you guys go through and you're like, well, is this a small or a large impact, or why? This is a really, really good resource. I think, so like, there's also other things in here about how to fill out the mapper and what certain types of information. And I'm not sure, and I think I don't know if I have the right one, but there's one of these resources out here that's similar, helps you identify the types of data that you can use to fill out the EAF mapper forms. And it also, it gets into like, okay, what types of data sets? And so in any event, there are, maybe this is the workbook. Yeah, so this is it. So this is the full EAF workbook. And what you'll see here is, you'll see instructions for what we should be provided. And then they'll have an example, of, project description, a sample map when there might be a wetland permit involved. So this will go through and give you really good information about, here's an example commercial. So like if there's a commercial project and we don't get like this level of detail, you could say, well, we really should have more detail on that project description. And then, there's, let me see if, I think there's a section in here. Yeah, so analysis of the responses. So, this is kind of a guide for reviewing that part one and the project. And I mean, I don't know, I don't know what, I mean, clearly if the CAC, for example, doesn't get the information that you guys think is required as part of some of this guidance, that's important. But, to the extent that you guys may want to recommend certain things, or, this kind of provides a foothold and a guidepost for how you might, approach, well, what is a small or large impact to an aquifer? We're concerned about the aquifer, is this going to be an apple orchard on top of a primary aquifer in karst geology, or is this, not gonna really. So anyway, that's kind of, I'll put that up there, but, let me, I'll send you the link to that in the presentation, but, I guess that's kind of it. I will stop. Do you guys have, and if you have any questions, I will share those slides. That was a whistle-stop tour.
It was a lot of information. Thank you.
That was a lot of nice information. Like how to use a handbook and find information when you're reading the book.
And I don't know, I think Jennifer, Risha, or excuse me, Rishi, it looks like we may have somebody from the public joining us.
Yeah, Rishi, did you want to make a public comment for the Conservation Advisory Council meeting?
Okay. It's really nice, important information on a nice project. On a project, how to like find information.
Yeah. Thank you. I think you said that it was a nice information on the project.
Nice information on the project.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Adam put that together and it was a great overview. Thank you for your input on that.
It's gonna,
Yeah.
Rishi, it'll be up on the town's website too, on the YouTube channel, after this broadcast is done, if you wanted to refer to it in the future.
Okay.
So Adam, I had a question for you. When you were showing the comprehensive plan, you showed the last comprehensive plan that that was passed by the town, and I know that there's one currently in draft. Should we be using the past comprehensive plan because it is the past and adopted document until the draft gets documented, or I'm sorry, until the current draft gets updated and adopted?
Yeah, I think so, officially. And I guess what I would say is, you would there's kind of two documents, that is the official, but it definitely at this point, it's going to be official next month. So you might basically make reference to, well, here's what the current comprehensive plan says. It's either reaffirmed or not affirmed in the future comprehensive plan, or there are these additional considerations or whatever. But yeah, I think the short answer is the current one is the current one until it's replaced with the updated version.
Thank you.
Great. And I had a question. It seemed like the two main points that you're thinking that the CAC could be inserted into the process is with that seeker review and then possibly with the pre-application process meeting. And did I miss anything else? Were there other places where you thought that, we as a group could really insert ourselves into it?
I mean, I think those are the only thing about seeker is if it's not subject to further review under seeker, I don't think that necessarily means that you guys wouldn't want to take a look at it and make a recommendation. So I might back up and say the planning board process, like, you probably want to be up on the stuff going through the planning board, and we could talk ways to do that. but I think, yeah, I think I would probably emphasize the planning board, and that's also will get you, you know, the town board, the stuff that elevates to the town board as well.
Great, thanks. Yeah, did you just make that PowerPoint for our meeting? Because that's going to be super useful.
Yeah, all those links will be very helpful.
Some of those are bookmarked and stuff, but yeah, I tried to have some structure for the meeting. So
Thank you.
my pleasure. And you know, it should give you a, you know, it's kind of like launch control on a supercar, you know.
I have a feeling you were just kind of skimming the surface. This is a snapshot into your brain.
Seeker in and of itself, you know, is extremely nuanced, and can be complicated in its application. And the lead agency going through Seeker, you know, has to make certain findings, and they have to be supported. And so, yeah, and then, you know, I mean, going through the comprehensive zoning law, and of course, there's all the changes and stuff that, you know, I think we would want, you know, that I've seen, like forestry. That would be one thing to, you know, looking at that wetlands law, that might be another. But yeah, anyway, if you guys want, if there's particular topics or things, you know, I can do a little bit more of a deeper dive, or another thing we can do is hire consultants to do a short presentation on stuff. Like if there's a particular technical thing that, you know, the group want, you know, in any event, happy to do that.
Great, thanks. All right, well, I feel like we should probably wrap up. And unless there's any more, like, does anybody else have any questions for Adam for right now? Okay, super. Thank you, Adam. That was awesome. And I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions as we go forward. I think that the final thing is to just kind of review the action items for our next meeting. So, Jenny, did you have a list of things to go through? Thanks.
Yep. Sorry. Somebody has to invite Megan to our next meeting.
Oh, I can do that.
Okay.
Because I have to email her anyways with the other tech stuff.
Okay, cool. And I know you and Adam are going to have a knowledge transfer.
Right.
We should all review the website before the next meeting. We should think about how to approach the S3 rep. I don't know if that would be before the next meeting or not. But Adam and the two Adams and Megan can talk to the S3 rep. Adam T volunteered to look into the QGIS. And we should all review Adam's excellent PowerPoint presentation and its many links. That's what I had.
And I think we are going to be kind of reviewing the checklist as well to be prepared for the next meeting,
Yeah.
correct?
Good point. Yes.
Yep, that sounds right. I already foresee we have a lot packed into that next meeting. So, you know, even if we just kind of scratch the surface of the checklist, at least it'll give us a starting point. You know, we'll keep revisiting these things each time. I'm not sure how long we'll need with Megan, but you know, if we have her there, we might as well maybe plan for about 45 minutes of, you know, picking her brain about the website. And if we have any lingering IT issues, we can ask her then as well.
Well, yes, everyone should sign into their email before the next meeting.
Yes, good idea. Lots of homework.
And so did we decide then every fourth Monday? So it looks like May 24th?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay.
Sounds right. Does that work for everybody?
As far as I can see.
All right, so I guess one of my action items will be to get the agenda. I need to get this into my head. Get the agenda together and get it, the notice and the agenda posted on the town website and the Zoom and all that. Okay, yeah. Got it.
And if you need any help on that too, if it, happy to, probably should try to use the CAC Zoom account for the next one.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I will definitely be tapping into your brain power for that.
Okay. And that notice, that should, now that you have that, you could just reuse that,
Oh, the text from the previous one. Perfect. Okay, thanks. All right. Anything else, Jenny, from the action items, or is that?
I didn't have anything.
Okay, great. Anything anybody needed to add?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion accepted. All right, guys, thanks for getting through this first one. That's awesome. It'll get a little more
Good night.
smoother.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.